Good afternoon. Let's begin by introducing yourself to the audience.
Yeah, my name's Ted Murdoch. I'm 27 years old. I'm currently living in Dover, Delaware, and I'm currently employed by the United States Air Force.
To get the full effect of who you are, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to this point in your life?
Yeah, I was born in Columbus, Mississippi. The family eventually moved to Ohio in the Cincinnati area. I went to school there, and then once I graduated high school, I went to Ohio State for a year, and then transferred to Eastern Kentucky University, where I graduated with a political science degree. And following college, I decided to enlist in the United States Air Force, mostly because it looked good on a resume, and I thought it would give me the structure that I needed to be successful throughout the rest of my life.
What was your athletic career like growing up?
I was pretty athletic. I didn't really have a huge athletic career in regards to structured sports, but I was always pretty good at backyard sports, and I did play a little bit of tennis while I was in high school, and I'm pretty good on the basketball court, and I know quite a good deal about a variety of sports. So,
would you say competitive sports growing up helped prepare you for boot camp?
That's a difficult question. I think they did physically. I think I knew what it meant to. I think those helped me to realize what it took to be physically fit, and I think it gave me an idea as regards to what it meant to be healthy overall. So I do think that they were beneficial in that aspect.
What were your fears of joining the Air Force?
Time. The first thing, you really have no idea what you're getting into. You get a lot of secondhand knowledge from certain people that you know in regards to people that have been in the Air Force or in the military prior. But it's really something that you can't really explain until you fully experience it yourself. But I felt pretty confident going into it initially.
Take us through a day in the life of an airman in boot camp. Like how the day starts, how does the day end?
The first thing I would say is it's very busy. You're busy from the moment you wake up till the minute you go to bed. They have a variety of tasks that you're required to perform, starting with, physical training. My experience is different from every other airman's experience. Every group that goes through basic training has a different experience and a different regiment and a different schedule. However, physical training and what we call PT was the first thing that we would do every morning. It would start about 5 in the morning. We would be either required to do cardio, which was about 30 minutes of heavy running and other various activities. And then other day, that was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then Tuesday and Thursday were strength training, push-ups and pull-ups and things like that. And that's how the day started. And then following that, subsequently, there was cleaning your room, marching around base to go to various different events, and then just learning basic qualities of being an airman, learning how to be obedient and things like that. So it was very structured is the term I would use.
Would you agree that the training you and your fellow airmen have received is unlike any training you've ever experienced?
Definitely different than any training that I had experienced prior. Yeah, I have not experienced anything like being in boot camp. It was definitely an experience that I would not be able to adequately articulate without experiencing it myself. Anybody that hasn't been in basic training might be able to look online or read about it, but it's really difficult to pinpoint if you haven't experienced it yourself.
Okay, now I'm going to go into stress athletic injury model. It can be extended to explain not only physical injuries, but also physical illnesses that may result from the combination of intense physical training and psychological variables.
Okay.
It is estimated that more than 25 million people in the United States are injured each year in sports, exercise, and recreational settings. For the purposes of this interview, injury means trauma to the body that results in at least temporary, sometimes permanent, physical disability and inhibition of motor function. Throughout your vigorous physical training in boot camp, tell me an incident where you endured an injury where you were subject to withdraw from an activity.
In regards to myself, I have never, thankfully, experienced that situation. I've been very fortunate to maintain my health throughout my entirety of being in the Air Force. However, the vast majority of people do experience the situation where they are unable to perform, tasks that are, if they're unable to perform daily tasks due to an injury. And a lot of that comes from the strenuous physical training that we are required to do daily. A lot of the main thing is that people's bodies are different. People handle the vigorous training that we do daily differently. And luckily, my body has kept me healthy, and my body has been able to hold up throughout that. But throughout my time in boot camp, as well as my follow-up time throughout the Air Force over the last 2.5 so years, people are constantly getting injured from a variety of different things. So I have personally not experienced that. However, I am fluent in understanding the amount of, or understanding the risks that are involved and how really fragile the human body can be when exposed to a certain amount of training or physical activity.
Could you tell us an example of one of your airmen that was injured and how he was injured?
Of course. It happens all the time. A lot of it can be from extensive training or really intense training, but a lot of it can be from simple things, just like marching, where you're pretty much just walking and you're just lifting your legs a little bit higher than you normally would. And a major problem when I was in boot camp, from what I remember, is we would have to march from one side of the base to the other side, which was about 3/4 of a mile to a mile. And doing this daily or hourly or numerous times throughout the day, people would get shin splints where their shins would begin to hurt and they weren't able to even really walk correctly. So it really doesn't matter. It just depends on what you're doing and how your body is able to cope with the exercise that you are, indulging yourself in at that time. So I've seen a number of people that have suffered physical trauma, maybe not trauma, that's probably not the correct word, but physical disability from a number of different exercises.
Right, okay. When people think injury, they automatically think physical. However, outside of the physical, there are many other factors such as social, psychological, and personality factors that influence injuries, while stress also plays a role. What physical factors would you admit to experiencing during your time at boot camp? Examples of physical factors would be, like you said, overtraining, high-speed collisions, multiple muscle imbalances, or physical fatigue. Things like that.
So are we attributing physical, are we talking about physical factors right here, or
Physical
mental factors?
Just physical factors.
Just physical factors. What would I attribute to those? I do think that mentally, I think mentality can play a part on the physical factor, because you can get into an instance where your mental capacity will allow you to be physically injured. It seems that people that don't have the mental resiliency that others do tend to get injured more. And a lot of it is just mental. A lot of it, everybody's been injured in the military. It just depends on the degree that you've been injured. I've been injured, but it's been minor, but I've had the mental capacity to overcome those obstacles. However, a number of people that don't have the mental fortitude to overcome those obstacles tend to get injured more so. So that tends to be an issue.
Do you think at your time you would consider it overtraining in the boot camp?
I think for some people it would be. People that aren't prepared when they go into basic training. I think people that are prepared, they run, they do push-ups, they are overall healthy. I don't think that they experience those kind of problems. But I think that if you are not prepared when you go into boot camp, I think overtraining is a concern because those people are not those people are not used to that level of exercise. So naturally, when they are expected and required to perform at a certain level, that is a level higher than they are capable of performing at.
So if you had to request a fellow airman that is coming into boot camp, what to prepare for, that would be one of them, to be physically active.
Oh, I think that's probably, outside of being mentally tough, which is probably the most important factor, because being mentally tough, without being mentally tough, you're not going to make it through. But a close second is definitely being somewhat physically fit. If you go in there overweight, you haven't done a push-up in 3 years, you can't run half a mile, you're going to really struggle, especially in the early parts of basic training. Because once you get towards the end of basic training, you've really been doing so much PT that your body becomes in really good shape, and it's really doesn't really become too much of an issue after a while. But initially, if you're going in there with nothing to stabilize you, or you're going in there with no pillars in regards to physical fitness, you are really going to struggle with those 2 or 3 initial weeks.
Social reasons have also been cited as a potential cause to injuries. Malcolm in 2006 mentioned that one such factor is athletes' perception that playing with pain and injury is highly valued in American society. Playing with an injury is seen as a desired characteristic by others such as friends, families, parents, teammates, and in your circumstances, drill instructors. Throughout boot camp, did social factors such as these affect the ways you handled your injuries?
That's a really good question. It's kind of a double-edged sword because what they want is it's really a catch-22 because they want you to play. They want you to play with pain. They want you to continue to perform even though you might be in pain. But it really depends on the seriousness of your pain, the extent of your pain. If you are in a certain amount of pain, they want you to go get help because you're not any good to the Air Force if you are so debilitated that you cannot continue your daily requirements. If you're playing with a sore toe, or if you're marching with, you have a little bit of discomfort in your shin, they want you to show a little bit of resiliency and continue to push forward. So in that aspect, I think that that's accurate. But they do not want you to continue if you have an injury that's significant enough that it's going to debilitate you further down the line, 6 months down the line. If this is going to be a recurring problem, they do not want you to continue them because you're no good to them and you're no good to yourself then. And you're not going to be able to continue or even conclude boot camp if you have that kind of injury. So I think it's both.
Right. And that actually goes into my next question. Many athletes and exercisers use the act tough method, which makes them socialize into believing that they must train through the pain. Consequently, this method causes overstrain, shin splints, sprained ankles, and many more other injuries that could be even more harmful to the body. In boot camp, are you taught how to distinguish the normal discomfort that accompanies overloading and in turn accompanies the onset of injuries? In other words, are you encouraged to train hard without risking injury in the military? Or are you directed in the way coaches today convey an athlete being injured, where they are suddenly ignored and labeled worthless once they are injured?
No. I think in the Air Force, I think that's very, I think this notion that you're supposed to fight through the pain regardless, I think that's very apocryphal. I don't think that that's accurate. They are very willing to get you the help that you need if you are experiencing severe pain. So minor pain, and I realize that this is difficult to judge how a human being is feeling, and once you go to the doctor, what level of pain you're in, the person could be biased, they could be embellishing a little bit, and that does happen because a lot of people don't want to participate in the strenuous exercise that they're doing daily. But it's usually pretty easy to tell whether or not somebody's in significant pain or if they're in mild pain. And if it's significant pain, the Air Force does not want you to continue. They will definitely provide you with the rest and recovery and whatever you need to get healthy. So I think the Air Force is actually very good at doing this. When you're in sports, say in high school say you're in high school basketball, I think they have a little bit tougher time of determining how serious the problem is. In the Air Force, they have regulations. They are very adequate and they are very persistent at looking to solve those problems of extreme physical concern. So the Air Force is actually, I think, better in that aspect than some kind of treatment you would get in a high school basketball or baseball kind of scenario.
Right. And you know how in competitive sports you usually have a role model throughout your course of that? Would you say you had a role model? Did you look up more to your drill instructors than you did your coaches in high school?
That's a really difficult question. I don't know if I looked up to them. It's a really difficult question. I think.
Or did you look up to other airmen?
No, I wouldn't say that because as an airman, you're in a group of guys and you're all in it together. Everybody's experiencing this same situation for the first time, so everybody's kind of new to it. They're kind of blind to it. I think that you do have a level of respect as an authoritative figure, regardless if it's a coach or a drill instructor. So you do take what they have to say. But would I say that I respected my drill instructors more than my coach? I don't know if that's true. I think both individuals, if you put them separately, I think they're both trying to do a job and they're trained to do a certain job. So I think I would probably put them on the same level of respect.
Psychological factors center around stress and the potentially stressful situations that can contribute to injuries depending on the athlete and how threatening he perceives the situation to be. The situations in your circumstance are highly threatening, therefore the probability of injury is increasingly high. Threatening situations increase state anxiety, which cause a variety of changes in focus and attention, along with muscle tension, like tightening up. Do psychological factors such as these and stress, vision, or blur your vision in certain circumstances?
I never personally experienced anything like that. I was pretty physically fit throughout my life. I've never really struggled, even during the times where I didn't participate in physical activity regularly. My body's been relatively easy. My body's been relatively prepared for that for the most part. I've been lucky in that aspect. But from what I can tell from people around me, I think your mental state does allow for you to over exaggerate a simple problem and making it a bigger problem than it actually is.
Have you ever been so stressed that you weren't thinking clearly and you ended up hurting yourself?
In boot camp, you're stressed all the time, and you're stressed to a level that you've not been stressed to before. I never hurt myself due to that, but I would attribute that more to my mental resilience. But I know people that have, and that's definitely your mind is more influential and powerful than any other aspect of your body. So of course, if your mind is not in the right state, that leaves the rest of your body to be increasingly vulnerable to a number of different injuries.
Time is of the essence in the military, correct?
I would agree.
So how, when you first got there, did you correlate to such extreme measures of time being so important?
Everything is structured. Time, you are told when you can go to the bathroom, you're told when you're going to eat, you're told how long you can eat, you're told how long you're going to sleep, you're told how long you're going to PT, you're told everything. So that really gives you the structure to perform at a level that the military requires of you, and that you learn very quickly within probably the first week or two that time is really looked upon as an essential variable in life.
Is PT optional for you?
No. Pete, I will admit that once you get out of basic training and once you get out of your technical school, PT does become a little bit more lax at that point. It's more, I wouldn't say it's voluntary, but it's more at your discretion than it is in basic training. However, you are still required to maintain a certain level of fitness in order to participate in a number of events, and say that you were required to deploy to a dangerous environment. You are expected to be able to maintain that level of fitness that would require you to be of service to the United States military in that environment. So it is more, it's the pressure is put on the individual more so than the group. Once you get out of that, you're required to maintain a certain level of fitness, but it's more on me than it was me being told to do it. So I have to maintain that level of physical excellence. And we do get tested. If you can show that you are excellent in physical training, if you get what's above a 90% on the PT test, you only have to test once a year. But if you show that you are struggling to maintain that level of excellence, you are required to engage in a physical training test every 6 months. So it's not is structured. They don't require group PT. It's not as regimented, but it's on me to maintain my level of physical fitness. And if I don't continue to do so, that will get weeded out relatively quickly, and it does happen a lot.
So if you don't have the tools for resilience in the military, how would you be reprimanded? Say if there are people quitting, or it is too strenuous of an activity and they decide that they cannot do it and they are too fatigued.
The military really has little concern for that. If you fail to pass physical training tests, which either take place every 6 months or every year, depending on your level of physical prowess, they will weed that out, and you can find yourself receiving administrative action, and that could mean reduction of pay, or it could mean expulsion from the military as a whole. It does happen quite frequently.
The last factor I want to talk about is personality factors. And that just consists of mostly self-concept of someone's self-esteem, optimism, hardiness.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that is a factor in how it plays on injuries today?
Absolutely. I work in a very small office for the most part. There's only about 12 to 15 of us. And it's well known within the office who has confidence in regards to their physical fitness and who does not. And the ones that don't have confidence seem to be the ones that struggle more so than the ones that are very confident in their physical abilities. And it's on the group, and it's on your fellow military member to help them become more confident, because the ones that aren't confident don't perform well on PT tests. They're the ones that don't want to PT regularly, and they ultimately are the ones that find themselves struggling. So confidence is extremely important.
Okay. Measures of these stressors, again, with stressors focus on major life changes, such as losing a loved one, moving to a different town, getting married, or expecting a change in economic status. These are just some examples of stress, or even just mild stress like traffic can cause that. Evidence suggests that athletes with higher levels of life stress have more injuries than do those with lower levels of stress. 85% of studies verified that this relationship exists. What stressors in your life were going on at the time that you were in boot camp that could have caused you injury?
I don't think boot camp is the best time to answer this question, because in boot camp you are pretty isolated. You don't know what's going on in the world around you. You really only talk to your family once a week for about 5 minutes. They really block you off from the outside world, so that your only stress involves what you're going through daily. I find personally that once you get out of boot camp and you begin to work in the operational Air Force, that stress becomes a major factor, because then you're dealing with finances, you're dealing with relationships, you're dealing with how you're doing with your supervision in the office. I feel that those stressors are more significant, because when you're in boot camp, you're very myopic. You are only looking straight forward. You're trying to get through the day, and you don't really focus on the outside world really at all. They don't really allow that. Your main focus every day is to get to bed. Make it through the day so that you can go to bed and start the next day. They're very good at shutting off the outside world. But once you get into the operational Air Force, it's very different, because then you're adding in the requirements and all the stress of being in the Air Force, along with a lot of the things that come with just being a member of society, with finances and relationships and things like that. So I find that being in the operational Air Force is much more strenuous in regards to stress than it is while you're in boot camp.
Okay, and how would you cope with these stressful situations, these setbacks?
I personally, I think it's really just a frame of mind. I think you just have to be mentally prepared. You have to realize that things are going to happen as they happen, and a lot of things are out of your control, and you just kind of have to live with what happens. And then, of course, there's other stress reducing factors that you can hanging out with friends. There are a number of different programs in the Air Force in which you can go and talk to people if you're having stressful concerns. The Air Force is actually very good at providing to their members the tools to alleviate stress to the best of their ability. There are so many programs. If you have a concern, if you're at work and you have a concern that you need to go take care of during work, the Air Force is very accommodating. And I find that really refreshing, because everybody thinks of the military as they're very regimented, they're very strict. And I can't speak for the other branches, but the Air Force is very understanding. And if I go to one of my supervisors and say, listen, I'm having an issue and it's really hurting my mental state, and I think that's hurting my physical capacity as well, they're very accommodating, and they will do whatever it takes, regardless of whether it's going to be a burden for the rest of the group or for the mission at hand. So I think that's one of the benefits of the Air Force.
Okay. Another thing, last thing that I want to touch on is the 5 stages of grief and the psychological impact of injury. Athletes and exercisers who have become injured often follow a 5-stage grief response process.
Yep.
Evidence shows that although individuals may exhibit many of these emotions, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and so on, this happens in response to being injured. Sometimes people who are injured don't follow these set of steps chronologically. Out of these 5 steps that I mentioned, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, which emotion, if any, would you best say you experienced or one of your fellow airmen experienced that you can recall from?
For me personally, I think anger is the big one, because I really take a lot of pride in being able to run a number of miles when I'm asked to. I take a lot of pride in being able to being one of the more physically fit people that I know in the Air Force. And even though I generally, in regards to weight training, in regards to strength training, I generally don't take part in that as much as a lot of other people. A lot of other people, lift weights a lot more than I do. My concern is more being overall, not building muscle mass, things like that. And I see that a lot in the Air Force. People are more concerned with their, with how they look more than how they feel. And people want to look big. They want to get big muscles. They want to be appealing to the eye. But I find that it's more about your overall physical fitness. It's not about getting the huge muscles. And when I am injured and I can't run and I can't do push-ups and I can't perform at the level that I want to perform at, I find that I become angry. That even makes me...
Depressed?
I don't know if I'd say depressed is the word, but it makes me determined to get back to the form that I was prior to my injury. So that's just from my own experience.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Murdoch. And I think I can say for everyone that we very much appreciate your service.
You're very welcome.